It's an honor and a privilege to present our pastor and overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. All praise to Yahweh. Come on, Tim. Beautiful, isn't it? You may be seated. Well, from these, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. From these schools of higher learning, or this guy said higher education. He had to change our quote there just a little bit to make it sound original, but I knew where he was coming from. From these schools of higher learnings also come forth the profaneness to all the earth. And I know you've heard me talk about the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It's all over the world now, and it's so slowly creeping further out into the oceans. Here's a new chart. This is the last one, and you can see how it's climbed for years back, and now it's the highest it's ever been in history. The dead zone that reaches out into the ocean, where many of you, I know, have been fishing in the Gulf Coast. I used to enjoy it before it became so contaminated. The Scientific American has also something to add to this. It's official, the 2011 among extreme weather years in history. It's the worst ever. Halfway point, 2011 has already seen 8 weather-related disasters in the U.S. that caused more than 1 billion damage. Just shy of the halfway mark in 2011 has seen 8 1 billion plus disasters with total damages from the wild weather at more than $32 billion. According to this latest study. They know that the climate changes is bringing this about, and of course they don't want to admit what is causing the climate changes, but the fact is the firmament or atmosphere is so damaged that many scientists are saying now that there's no turning back. There's no way to renew it. But still, they won't admit what is causing it. The chart here, if you could see the red, I don't know if you can see the red. It's everywhere, but this is the most fires ever in the United States has occurred this year, and that too is related to this next one. Concerns over a rise in the new gay HIV cases. If you keep up with the studies, you know that the HIVs or the STDs was started with gays to begin with. That plus fornication and adultery and bestiality. And then it spread, the STDs, they mutated and started spreading to other people. It doesn't just stay with the gays, as they call themselves. It spreads to the entire world. They brought this profaneness to all the world. They've also brought it to our oceans. It's killing the oceans. It's killing our atmosphere. It will be, before too much longer, to where you can't braise food, period. Mankind is slowly killing himself. Syphilis, something we thought we had killed with penicillin, And I've told you about the fights that I was involved with as a young man working in the laboratories, State Board of Health laboratories. But syphilis testing could dramatically cut baby deaths. Now, research shows that it's at an all-time high right now. Research by British scientists published in the Lancet Infectious Disease Journal on Thursday found that syphilis is a major cause of infant deaths. Some 2 million pregnant women are infected with syphilis globally each year. And most people don't even know they have it because the rash that was on their face went away, or wherever it was on their body went away, and of course they thought the case was gone. It's only later in life, when your body starts getting weaker, that the syphilis attacks are able to attack the organs such as your eyes, your heart, your cardiovascular system, any place in your body they could set up home, and that's when they kill you. And this is the way with syphilis. But of course the babies are being born with it. Some 2 million pregnant women are infected with syphilis globally each year, and around 1.2 million of these transmit the infection to their baby. Experts say an estimated 1 million babies die each year from congenital syphilis. The World Health Organization estimates that 20 million new cases of syphilis occur every year. Most people with syphilis tend to be unaware of it, and so can unwittingly pass it on during relations to the child, to unborn children. In a comment on the study's findings, Peter Plott, director of London School of Hygiene and tropical medicine, said that it was a reminder that syphilis is not a disease of the past, but a major cause of death for hundreds of thousands of newborn babies at present. And that's from your schools of higher learning that also brought you television. HIV scanning. If you want to know what it looks like, it looks real great on your lymph nodes. The little dots here, all of them, that's your HIV virus. And of course, there are things you can do. I don't know of anything that will get rid of it, but except Yahweh Himself, that He's going to. He's going to. The earth is going to have to be cleansed. Last week we were studying in Isaiah 56, and I felt, like I wasn't doing something right, or people would understand that there's only salvation in the house of Yahweh, and that's what your scripture showed. Praise Yahweh. There's thousands of religions out there, religious organizations, but the only place you're going to get salvation is in Yahweh's house, and it's shown over and over and over by the prophets, by the apostles, by the Savior. Why would the Holy Scriptures say to seek the habitation of Yahweh? And of course, the word is used there, and the Catholic Church, they took the name Yahweh out, of course, and put the word Lord there, which means rabbi, and most of it means dead rabbis, because these are the lords that they pray to, that the Catholic Church prays to today, and of course they got the whole world to worshiping lords. The whole world is deceived. Yahweh plainly says that in Revelations 12:9. You're a fool if you don't believe it. The whole world. But in the last days, He says, I will establish my house. Well, of course, we know that the house disappeared almost 2,000 years ago. On the door of the Apostle Kepha's house, before they destroyed him and his house, and then built a church there nearby. So a monastery, they call it. I called it a monster. A monster that's scary. They call it a monastery. So I think that's what the word actually means. But the rabbis today go there and pray to these to the people. I guess they think their ghost is hanging around that site, so they pray to it. The body is found in Rome. They say Kepha's body is found in Rome. What little is left of it, and they're praying to that. It's kind of like praying to a brick wall. Also, they pray to the Wailing Wall, and get as much results there as they do from these dead bones that they're praying to. Their prayers are going to be answered. They're ruling the world, and that's their prayers. I want to rule the world, God. Help me to rule the world. Help me to own the world. Well, they do. That prayer is certainly answered. Yahweh allowed that to take place. But remember, there are two of these trees. In Genesis, let's turn there and read it. And hopefully there's no pages missing today. In Genesis 2 and verse 9, we see here two trees, but only one of them has life. One of them has life and the other one has death. Yahweh shows that there's only 7 of these works of His which He prophesied to use that would be the house of Yahweh, and actually called the house of Yahweh, that brings life, where salvation is actually offered. Well, to get salvation, you've got to be tried. And that was the sole purpose for creation of mankind, was to be tried, to give him a trial to where he could try out for this job in the kingdom. You want a job? There's plenty of jobs, not in the schools of higher learning. Those are falling, as you just saw. It's nothing but a scam. And of course, more and more people are realizing this now. And the schools of higher learning, as they take, as they fall or collapse in their own greed and their own cheating. I suppose you noticed on the news where the teachers, so many of them, school administrators, were filed on for cheating on the students' records, giving them a higher grade than they actually made, to boost their school, and of course to make people think that that they were really doing something great, when in fact the ability to teach is diminishing now, as Yahweh prophesied it would. I can't think of the exact scripture, but Yahweh said, "I'll take away from you the wise man, the man of learning, the prophet and the priest, the bread of life. He's going to take everything from it." Well, in the Hebrew words there, it meant the ability to teach wisely, like for instance Solomon had and David had. But it's written as if Yahweh Himself took it away. But it's not that way. Yahweh said, "This is what you're bringing on yourselves." And of course, the STDs that we saw and the syphilis that we thought were gone, they also attacked the brain. And Yahweh said, "This will bring you confusion." When these things get in your brain, 2 million new cases a year, and then the last report was 12 million new cases a year. Now, of course, the children are being born with it, so it doesn't take that long to get to the brains of the latest people that we have with their fingers on the triggers and their hands on the strings that pull the world in the direction that it's going now. And Yahweh said, this will bring this about. What you're doing is going to bring you down, he said. Well, of course, he prophesied this, but who has believed our report? Isaiah said. Who has believed our report that we're giving? Well, now, Yahweh, he said, I call heaven and earth to witness this trial. I'm going to prove what I say. It will prove to you that this is actually what you're going to do to yourselves. So the ability that we're seeing in the schools now is diminishing. I remember I think I told you of this, but I remember one of the teachers in college saying, and he was bragging about nobody made an A in his class. And I thought, he was bragging, but I thought it was, I said, if he doesn't have the intelligence to teach the class where the children can make A's or where they can learn it, he needs to step aside and let someone else teach. but he was bragging about them not making an A. To me, this was saying, I'm not capable of teaching you. And then I see this in Scripture where this is actually going to take place. Well, now we're seeing it. And of course, the students that we have in the classrooms they can't learn themselves because their minds are confused also. But the teachers who are teaching them have an inability from the confused minds that they have. So all this together has come up with what we saw in this film today. The prophecy is being fulfilled. The schools are no longer capable of even teaching their own thing and then bringing it to pass in the world. And what they're wanting, of course, is money-making systems to keep the world working for them. Just a scam to keep the world working for them, the big corporations. But Yahweh shows here that there's two trees here. And then he shows in other prophecies that there are 7 of his works. And then in 2 verse 17 he says, but of the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil you must not eat. Meaning, don't go near. Don't have anything to do with it. And it's going to fall. That's what all the rest of the prophets showed. And Revelations is the best at that bringing that to light, what is actually going to take place. Babylon, that means confusion, is fallen. Now, the tree of righteousness only, if you look at chapter 4 there, the tree of righteousness only, not the churches. You can't go to the churches. If you do, you're serving and become a servant of Satan. That's what's shown in 1 Yochanan 3, verse 7 and 8, if you will write that down and read it. If you go there and work with them, then you become a servant of Satan the devil, bringing forth this tree of righteousness and evil that Yahweh says have nothing to do with. And others said, come out from among them. Touch not the unclean thing, which they're full of abominations, Revelation said. They're full of uncleanness. There's no way you can get around them without touching the unclean. And some of this uncleanness now we see will not come off. It doesn't come off. Once you get it on you, it stays with your body. And it starts bringing it down even more than it is already. But in chapter 4 now, we see of these two trees, he says, chapter 4 and verse 6, he says, so Yahweh said to Cain, why are you angry and why are you downcast? Have you ever seen that from a fall away? It seems like they're bitter, they hate the world, They hate the house. They hate everything about the house. They could find more to gripe about than I won't go there. But their mind, and he saw this and showed you this here in Cain. Why are you angry, he says, and downcast? Why aren't you joyful? Why aren't you joyful? You should have found joy already. If you had been doing what I told you to do, you would have this joy already in Yahweh. Why are you miserable and hateful, Cain? Well, all the world has gone the way of Cain. And of course, all the world is blaming everyone else, but they all have a part in it. If you go near or take service in these places, you become a part of that system, Yahweh said. If you do righteousness, you will be accepted. Do you get that? Verse 7. If you do righteousness, you will be accepted. This word accepted, if you have a King James reference Bible, it'll have a little N there by it, and it'll say excellence. And of course, if you look the word up in Strong's, that word accepted, it means an elevation, that Yahweh is lifting you up. When you start doing righteousness, then you start getting better. The confusion starts leaving. You start building your mind towards joy and gladness, and you start becoming a servant to others, and you really start enjoying life as Yahweh Himself does. It actually means cheerfulness. Yes, that word accepted there in verse 7 actually means cheerfulness. It means exaltation in rank, in character, in rank and character, raising, being raised up, as Yahweh, Isaiah said, those that wait on Yahweh, which means those that practice righteousness, will be raised up like on eagle's wings. Well, this is what it's speaking of here. And many have found their joy in Yahweh, and many are going to be, praise Yahweh, put in those excellent jobs of excellence, or jobs of high degree, above even the Malachim. It means dignity also, excellency, accepted, highness, raised up. That's all the things there. If you study every one of those words, you'll see what Yahweh put in that little Hebrew word, where if you do righteousness. Now, if you go to the mixture of righteousness and evil, you start seeing that diminish with confusion of the mind, which we're seeing it now. You know, you see these things taking place. When you see these things, as the Savior Yeshua said, if you are righteousness or practice righteousness, then you become this high, elevated character of joyful cheerfulness and gladness. Now, if you go keep that in mind, look over to Deuteronomy, righteousness. Keep righteousness in mind, the word righteousness, and you turn to Deuteronomy 6, you'll see here, and you've got to put this together and be able to teach it. Being able to teach it is as important as learning it to begin with. But you've got to learn it before you can teach it to others. Deuteronomy 6, verse 1 there says, of course, it says, now these are the laws, the statutes, and the judgments. And down in verse 5, you must love Yahweh. Well, this takes some work, because you've got to find out what Yahweh actually is, and you can only see Him through the prophets' writings, which show you Yahweh is just when you don't find that in the world. Yahweh is so knowledgeable that He could create mankind, and He is creating mankind in His own likeness and image. And those who will allow this, who will actually choose this, they will reach this elevation that He says then where they can be trusted with authority to actually rule the universe or teach and guide the universe, be an example to the universe, as Yahshua Himself is. Yahshua was the shining example, and of course that's what you are training to be, and that's the sole purpose of creation. There was no other reason to create mankind, for Yahweh to create mankind, but to make him in His likeness, to fulfill the jobs that He has open for them right now. Billions and billions of jobs that He has open for them right now. I keep wanting to tell you about this thing that's headed this way. I don't know how many of you are keeping up with it, but everything is falling, praise Yahweh, everything is falling in place for, it looks like it could be as early as this year. But here just recently there was a asteroid past the Earth that was really close. And nobody even knew anything about it till the gravity pull from this thing, started causing a lot of trouble on Earth. And then it was reported. Well, they said, oh yeah, they knew about it, but they just didn't report it because it didn't seem to be, anything that people would be concerned about. So they kept it a secret. I'm thinking they were lying. I'm thinking they knew nothing about it. And I'm thinking with all their magnificent telescopes and their computers and to watch the sky, I'm thinking they didn't see it. And of course it slipped up on them. If Yahweh so wanted to, He could send what He did to Jupiter on a 6-day war. He could send that and totally destroy the earth if He wanted to. He is able to kill or He is able to give life. What He doesn't like, of course, is seeing misery and hatred that develops into what we're seeing right now among the nations. He's made a way to stop this, and of course that's the reason, again, you were created. So if you'll train, if you'll accept Yahweh only, not the tree of mixture of righteousness and evil, put the peaceful solution to work in your life. Teach it to your family. Be diligent in doing so, as you're told there in verse 7. Be diligently talking about this when you rise up and when you go to bed. One of the best things you can do when you wake up of a morning is start praying to Yahweh for guidance. The human mind is incapable of rulership. We're made that way. We're made to where emotions pull us. Yahweh can give us that extra boost, but we have to ask for it. And, of course, we're told early in the morning, our thoughts should rise to you, Yahweh. And, of course, this will start you off in the way you want to go if you'll ask Him for that guidance. So you'll get your mindset, well, I won't be doing what I did yesterday. I don't want to do that again. And this way you won't be repenting of the same thing over and over. I was telling someone this morning when they were confessing their sins, I said, this is several times I've heard this. Now, repenting is great, but conversion must follow this. So you've got to stop doing these things that you're repenting of. So wake up with Yahweh on your mind and pray that He guides you every minute to keep you from making these stupid mistakes that you've made so many times that makes you look like a blooming idiot. That's Mother's flower garden. She raised blooming idiots. Well, don't be like that. Be like Yahweh Himself and ask for His guidance to start with. Teach it to your children. The only way, praise Yahweh, the only way you can keep the peaceful solution from working is, of course, ignore it. Don't use it, and it won't work for you. And you will be like Cain. Why are you so angry, Cain? Why are you so bitter? You hate the world. Why are you always in a fight and an uproar? You're speaking to the nations. All the nations have gone the way of Cain, not of Yahweh. All the churches today are filled with evil. They bring forth evil. They don't bring forth the laws of righteousness, the peaceful solution. They don't teach that. They don't love Yahweh, which if you look back there to verse 5 again, that's your first and greatest commandment. The first and greatest law. The second one is love your neighbor as yourself. But you can't do this without Yahweh's guidance. You can't do this and break any one of Yahweh's laws. And First Yochanan says you're a liar. If you say that you love your brother and you don't keep Yahweh's commandments, you're a liar. You're just like Cain, it says. Read the 3rd chapter of First Yochanan, the 3rd chapter, and you will see he calls all these churches liars. They teach brotherly love. They don't even know what brotherly love is. All of them have gone the way of Cain. There is responsible for the murders in Israel, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, all over the world. They're as responsible as the ones that pulled the trigger to throw the bomb. Yes, the churches are responsible for this, and the schools of higher learning. But they got great plans. Their great plans are to depopulate the earth, and they're making places of safety for themselves to protect themselves so they can start over and rule. Well, rule was what they were wanting to do in the first place that brought this. If you remember Satan, where have you been? Oh, just traveling back and forth, up and down. This is the one that wanted to raise herself above others. She didn't want to be a servant, as Yeshua was. She's got all the world to wanting to do the same thing. And if they were capable of actually protecting themselves through this horror that they got planned to come upon the earth shortly, if they were capable of protecting themselves, what are they going to come back to? If they're out there at the space station or wherever the place of protection is, which I'm being told there's a bunch of them being built by several nations, and others have it in their planning, and they blow the earth up with nuclear wars, what have they got left? Do you think mankind could actually survive to clean this earth up? Not with the power of mankind. All that mankind can do is make worse with their schools of higher learning. Well, in verse 25, it said, "This will be our righteousness." Now, this is what he said to Cain. If you do righteousness, if you love Yahweh, if you teach this way of righteousness to your children diligently, the laws of Yahweh, verse 1, my laws, statutes, and judgments, this is your righteousness. If you don't teach these, then it's sin. Sin lies at your door. These laws, statutes, and judgments, and loving Yahweh and wanting to be a part of the Yahweh family will actually help you to get rid of the sin that lies at your door, that he told Cain. If you do righteousness, you will be elevated. You will be lifted up in character. in character and knowledge and wisdom, the wisdom that it takes to manage authority, to manage knowledge, to where it will only benefit and not hurt. The world doesn't have that wisdom. It has a lot of knowledge right now. Knowledge was increased in this generation. But they don't have the wisdom to manage it properly. And the plans they have is not to make it better, but destruction. The plans that all the governments have at this time. First strike, to survive or try to survive and have something left for their children or grandchildren. Now that's their form of righteousness that stinks. It's like dirty rags, filthy rags, as Yahweh says. Well, this is in Deuteronomy now. If you go over, remember the word righteousness, and go over here to Yochanan, the first Yochanan, way back here close to Revelation or Yada, just before Yada. First Yochanan. Now here's the apostles speaking. They claim to follow, the Christians claim to follow the New Testament, what they call the New Testament. Well, that New Testament, as described in Hebrews 10:16, this is the New Testament that I will give to them after those days. I will write my laws in their hearts, in their minds will I write them. Without Yahweh's laws, you're the cause of what is going on in the world. And if you take part in the churches, or you have somebody you're cuddling up to that's taking part in them, you're a devil worshiper. That's what Yahweh calls you. That's the reason he said, after the first and second admonition, let them have nothing more to do with them. Get away from them so you won't suffer the same plague, which is death. Dying, you will die. That's what Yahweh says. Never to be resurrected. You won't have part in the new world. The big problem is the person that's pulling you out, be daughter, son, whatever, father, sister, brother, they could be called later. They, after they're resurrected, if they're not called now, but they could beat you out of your salvation right now if you don't stand up to them and get them out of your house. In First Yochanan 3, verse 4, sin is the breaking of these laws. We just read that. Sin lies at your door. That's what he told Cain in chapter 4, verse 7. Remember? Well, 1 Yochanan 3, verse 4 says the same thing. Sin lies at your door. If you're not doing righteousness, you're sinning. If you don't keep each one of them, you're sinning. If you give in to either one of them, James or Jacob 2 verse 10 says the same thing. If you break one, you're guilty of breaking them all. Going to the house of the gods alone is breaking one, because he's told you to have nothing to do with them. Cuddling up to those who follow Satan and her ways is breaking another. You're told to have nothing more to do with them. If you break one, you're guilty of murder. You're guilty of the confused minds that have brought all the STDs. You're guilty of sodomy, bestiality. You're guilty of pulling the trigger on a nuclear bomb. All the sins are going to fall on your head if there's one of those laws that you don't practice or refuse to practice. Verse 6, he says, whoever abides in him does not sin. That is, he keeps practicing and overcoming until he overcomes sin. And Yahweh says, I give them plenty of time to do so. Verse 7 says, little children, don't let the churches deceive you. The churches are teaching sin. The schools of higher learning teach sin. They teach the breaking of Yahweh's laws. They teach sin. They teach you to sin. And if you go near them or cuddle up to them, you're guilty and become a part of their sins. And all the sins are falling upon your head as well as theirs. Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. But he who commits sin belongs to Satan the devil. That's the tree of righteousness and evil that brings forth the confusion, that brings forth the destruction that we're seeing in all the world today, even to our own bodies. Now, look at verse 10. In this the children of Yahweh and the children of the devil are manifest. That is, it's made clear who they are. There is no confusion about who the house of Yahweh is. Everybody on earth knows where the house of Yahweh is right now. The people, the authorities saw to that. Yahweh allowed them to do it to lift us up to where everyone on earth would know where the house of Yahweh is. The American Indians knew this and wrote about it. You'll see more on this later. Fantastic information. The people come here and they say they were hunting the house of Yahweh because they saw it in prophecy. A person that is living here right now, her daddy told her before he died that there would be two brothers. There would actually be two brothers that would bring forth the peaceful solution of Yahweh in the last days. Two brothers that would be the two witnesses, he said. And he told his daughter this, and his daughter came here after he died and became a part, her and her family became a part of the house of Yahweh. Well, that's what Yahweh meant when he said, Yeshua said, search the scriptures. Yahweh said, seek the habitation of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh. And in the last days, he said, I will establish my house again. And salvation, he says, wasn't offered before this time because there was no one available to teach it or assigned to teach it, is what Zechariah said. So there's no doubt on the face of the earth now. They know the name House of Yahweh, and they know the name Yisrayl Hawkins, and they know who I claim to be. And some of them, about 4 million a week now. That's a lot of people a week right now that's inquiring to find out where we are. I don't know how many of those will actually come. I'm thinking that the more they find out, the more they'll be convinced. But in this, the children of Yahweh and the children of Satan, the devil, are made clear. They're made absolutely clear. So the person can make the choice to accept the tree of life. Let's go back to Deuteronomy again. Deuteronomy 12 this time. So there's no doubts as to where the house of Yahweh is. In fact, it's called the house of Yahweh. That name is ours. Nobody else. Nobody else can even use it legally. They're breaking the law. They're breaking their own laws when they try to use it themselves. The only ones that legally use the name House of Yahweh is this place right here where you're sitting at this time. Something more, we're the only ones on the face of the earth that's teaching Yahweh's law. Love Yahweh. They're saying, no, love the dead rabbis, the dead lords. And they're worshiping their bones. and worshiping the rocks that their tombs are, and house their bones. Well, here in Deuteronomy now, 12, and verse 5, he says to seek the habitation of Yahweh, to seek it. And then in chapter 17, no doubts about this at all, 17 of Deuteronomy, in verse 9, go there, go to the priests there, who are Levites, and to the judge who is in office at that time, ask for their decision. Ask for their decision? Now, if you don't ask for their decision, you're sinning. Did you get that? This is a law. This is coming straight from Yahweh. Inspired the prophets. You're a fool if you don't believe it, and you're a worse fool if you don't do it. Then you're like the dogs that turn to their own vomit. You know what you're supposed to do, but you don't do it. So set your mind to be a part of Yahweh's house and learn that way, and you will find joy instead of bitterness. Who is in office at that time asks for his decision. Verse 10 says you must act according to the sentence they pronounce for you at the place. At the place. You can't go to some other place and get Yahweh's decision. Do you get that? That's a law. He won't be at some other place. He's only going to be at the place where he offers salvation. That's his habitation, Yahweh said. The habitation of Yahweh. The place at the place. Then verse 11, according to the law, they teach you. That's where the law of Yahweh is taught. That's the only place on earth that the law of Yahweh is taught. I know there's people out there saying they teach the laws of Yahweh. They're liars. According to the apostles, they are liars. According to Yeshua, they are liars. Satan has liars all over the world lying about salvation to the people who come to them. They're liars. They don't teach the laws of Yahweh. If they taught the laws of Yahweh, they would teach you've got to go to the house of Yahweh. Don't you see that? So they're liars. If they speak not according to the prophecy and the laws, it's because there is no light in them, period. They're doing it falsely. They're doing it for selfish gainsay. They got their own selfish motives, as Yeshua said. According to the law, they teach you in that place, at that place that Yahweh chooses. They give you. You will do. Oh, you will do it. That's a law. If you don't do it, you become a child of Satan, the devil. It will keep you out of the kingdom. Look back to Deuteronomy 12 again. Deuteronomy 12. Now that you've got that in mind, in the place. And remember verse 5 said, seek the habitation of Yahweh. That's the house of Yahweh. The place which Yahweh your Father shall choose. Verse 7, there in front of Yahweh, which means Yahweh is there. There in front of Yahweh, which means He knows and He sees you are at the appointed time, keeping His Sabbath at His habitation within His walls. There in front of Yahweh your Father. Now there ain't no way that you can mistake this. You know, it's plain. It's in every version of the Holy Scriptures. The only thing they've changed is they took the word Yahweh out and put the word Lord and God there in its place. But you already know that. So you know it's Yahweh. And you know here, and no uncertainty at all, what he's saying here. In front of Yahweh, at the place he chooses, the house of Yahweh, there's only one on the face of the earth right now. Only one. This is it. Praise Yahweh. There in front of Yahweh your Father, you and your family shall eat. If you could see what they've cooked up for you over there, the color alone just makes your mouth water. The color of that oaky chicken today. Tender, juicy, oaky chicken. It's just the right color, the right texture, everything. And smell, I could actually, well, I imagined it, I think, but I thought I was smelling it this morning up here. You shall eat, your families, notice, shall eat and rejoice. You're going to find rejoicing there. Verse 11. Then there will be a place, if the salvation is offered, there will be a place where Yahweh will offer it. That place Yahweh will choose to establish His name. We're the only ones that established His name. We, the house of Yahweh, established Yahweh's name in the land that became the chief of the nations, as it was prophesied, chief of the nations, and the lands He brought us from the ends of the earth, the last ends of the earth to be inhabited. Oklahoma and Texas was it. And not because we were told to go west, young man, but that's what our parents did. And you shall rejoice, that verse 12. Now, if you don't learn to rejoice, you're breaking Yahweh's law. In front of Yahweh. Rejoice in front of Yahweh, you and your wives, your sons, your daughters, your men servants and your maid servants, everyone. And another law says everyone that's in your household, whether they're believers or not, even your men servants, your maid servants, everybody, but definitely your sons and your daughters are commanded to go. And if you're the governor of that house and they don't want to go, then you're held responsible for their sin if they don't come. You become a part of their sins and, of course, a part of Satan the devil. The Levites who live within your gates, since he has no portion or inheritance with you, be careful not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in every place you please. That's the law. You can't do it. But only in the place Yahweh chooses out of all the tribes to set His name. In verse 16, only you must not eat the blood now. Don't eat the blood. People don't even know how to keep from eating blood today, not even in Israel. Look at verse 18. But you must eat these in front of Yahweh your Father in the place Yahweh your Father chooses. I don't see how anyone could ever, let's go back to verse 11, misunderstand that. In front of Yahweh. Verse 11, chapter 12, verse 11. And there will be a place. There will be a place. Look at Deuteronomy 12 and verse 1. These are the judgments, the laws, that you must observe to do. This is it. These are the laws. Now, if you don't do it, then let's go back to chapter 3 of Genesis. Chapter 3 of Genesis. Chapter 3. And here's where you stand. Chapter 3 and verse 10. And Adam said, I heard the word of Yahweh being proclaimed in the garden, and I was afraid because I had sinned. I had sinned and hid myself. Didn't want to come to services, of course, because he was ashamed. She was ashamed. And Yahweh said, someone deceived you so that you would sin. They deceived you so you would sin. You have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, you should not eat. Well, of course, a scene in that church, and now I've got to go and face the elders, and they know they saw me. They know that I was there. I've got to hide somewhere. Let's be turning over to Jacob or James, if you have a King James version now. Remember, 2 places of worship. One, you can worship Yahweh. The other one, you can worship Satan, the devil. And you don't even have to know him. You don't even have to know her. You can worship you can worship her without even knowing it. I'll find this in just a minute and give you the page number. Chapter 4. Jacob chapter 4. Found on page 955. 955. Satan can't and won't bring you life. She wouldn't if she could. She hates mankind because she knows the potential of mankind and why he was created, what potential he has in ruling the universe, and we do have that great potential if we just yield to Yahweh. But you've got to choose it. That's all. And it may take some longer to overcome, but you can overcome. And Yahweh doesn't hold you responsible for what you can't, what you don't have the ability to do. He doesn't hold you responsible for that. But what you have the ability to do, He holds you responsible for it. We can help. If you're weak, we can help you. All you've got to do is ask the priest. Like Yahweh says, we're there to help. Praise Yahweh. But notice now in chapter 4 of Jacob, or James, if you have a King James version, Yahweh, there's only one lawgiver. Satan don't give you laws. She gives you democracy. Freedom from the law. That's what all the churches teach. That's what all the religions teach. Freedom from the law. And they teach that Jesus did it for you, so you're set free from the law. I was reading something from one of the Bible helps, and you could see the hatred. The writer called it the book of Galatians that set us free from the legalistic forms of the law. Yeah, it did. It gave you freedom to go to hell and burn. But that's all it gives you. If you notice there too that Yahweh is the only one that can save or to destroy. The word Yeshua, it means Yahweh will save His people from their sins. Another verse that was written by a prophet said Yahweh knows how to save His people. I believe that was in one of the Psalms. The secret to understanding this is, who is His people? Now, He's going to save you if you are His people from your sins. And that's what Yeshua died for, to save Yahweh's people from their sins. Yahweh's people are the ones that practice His laws, as we just read. That's His people. The ones that choose to practice His law. Those, if you're say, well, I've tried this several times and I just can't do it, I forget. Yahweh doesn't hold you guilty for what you can't do. He holds you guilty for how much you try, how much effort you're putting into overcoming. And there's ways that little things, techniques that you can use if you will just ask. The counselors can give you those techniques. The elders are fully trained in this, the priests are. But he says, Yahweh, there's only one lawgiver, that's Yahweh, who is able to destroy, notice, who is able to save and to destroy. He's able to save you, or He's able to destroy you. If you turn back to Matthew, the Savior spoke of this because mainly the reason this is written is because they're trying to teach you that you have an immortal soul, like the lie that Satan told to Eve. And Eve fell for it. She was deceived by it, that you have an immortal soul, Eve. But you don't have that immortal soul. If you notice here in Yeshua's writings, And you're a fool if you don't believe his writings, his words. And Matthew 10 and verse 28. Matthew 10 and verse 28. He says, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the spirit." The King James Version there says soul. "But rather fear him," that is Yahweh, who says he's the one lawgiver who is able to save or to destroy. Fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in Gehenna. If it was immortal, he couldn't destroy it, could he? But he is able to do that, and the way he does it is shown in Revelations. Well, let's turn over to Revelations 22. Yahshua, the word Yahshua means Yahweh will save his people from their sins. How does he do this? You seek the habitation of Yahweh. You come to his house. You ask the priest. Don't tell the priest what you want or what you're going to refuse to do. He'll probably tell you, go see a Baptist. You're in the wrong plot. In Revelations 22 and verse 12, "Behold, I come quickly." This is Yahshua speaking here. "Behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to lift you up, to give you authority," the authority that he has now. That's what he wants to give to you. That's what Yahweh wants to give to you. And he says, make the choice. Choose life or death, death and destruction. He's able to destroy everything, even the memory of you. "My reward is with me to give to every man according to his works," or according as his work will be. And if you don't receive this work assigned by him, that means you missed out. Now's the time to work on those points that you're missing. "I'm the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Blessed are those who keep his laws." Yes, they belong to Yahweh, as 1 Yochanan 3, 7 and 8 tells you. They're the ones that's practicing keeping Yahweh's laws, practicing coming to perfection. If you don't practice it, that means you're not trying. And the effort you put into it is the effort that you're being judged by. "Blessed are those who keep Yahweh's laws, that they might have right to the tree of life." That's the tree of righteousness, the tree of life, notice, the tree of life. The others don't have that right. If you're not practicing Yahweh's laws, you don't have that right to the tree of life, living forever, eternal life, "and may enter into the gates into the city. For outside are the dogs, the sorcerers, dogs, that's sodomites, if you want to look the word up. Where you're going to church, those places are filled with these things that he names here in verse 15. I, Yahshua, they're full of God worshipers. And you become a part of that God worship when you go to those places. And whether you know it or not, you're learning from them. They're teaching you. They've become your teacher. And you have become their student, a student of Satan the devil, asking for confusion. I, Yahshua, have sent my Malach to testify to you these things in the congregations of the house of Yahweh. To testify these things, notice where it's going to be told to you. It's not being told in the churches and the religions of the world. They're teaching you democracy, freedom from the laws of Yahweh. I am the root and the offspring of David. This goes all the way back now, if you remember, to Genesis 49, the offspring of David, the rightful owner of the scepter of righteousness, whose donkeys was hitched to the vine. He was the vine. And the donkey's coats hitched to the branch that of the house of Yahweh in the last days. I am the root and offspring of David. the bright and morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, Come. And let him who hears say, Come. Let him who hears teach. Come to the house of Yahweh. And let him who is thirsty come to the house of Yahweh, the habitation of Yahweh, within the walls of Yahweh. And whosoever will choose, let him take of the water of life freely. Well, my time is up. I wanted to get further into this time, but my time is up. Now, surely that was simple enough for everybody, right? Praise Yahweh. So if you don't now, well, you can't blame me for it. I'm going all out even to embarrassment to get this over, so no one will misunderstand where the house of Yahweh is and what you have to do to remain a part of that house, this house. Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!